Welcome to Anatomy and Physiology at Glen Oaks Community College. I'm Dr. Ren Hartung. For this video, I'm going to talk about levels of organization of the human body. As it's titled here, here are the levels: chemical level of organization, cellular level, tissue level, organ system level, and then organism level. I'm going to go through them in brief and describe them. And if you're an anatomy and phys student, here's usually what you need to be able to do. Be able to put these in order, whether it's from the simplest or from the most complex, and then be able to put them in order depending on what your instructor asks for. And then for each one, be able to describe each one of these levels of organization. So I'm going to first do that in very brief, and then I'm going to go and get a little more heavy or complicated on each one. Okay, chemical level of organization. There we're talking about atoms of elements, so carbon atoms, hydrogen atoms, nitrogen atoms, etc., to atoms coming together to form molecules, which is a molecule is two or more atoms stuck together. And those molecules can be gigantic. DNA is a pretty darn big molecule, but it's made out of millions of atoms. Okay, so that's the chemical level, atoms and molecules. Cellular level, there we're talking about organelles and cells. And the critical thing to understand about the cellular level is this is where we consider things to be alive, because cells can do everything that a living thing can do, like reproduction and metabolism and all that fun stuff. So that's the cellular level. If we get enough cells together, we can have a tissue. The tissue level of organization. This is where multiple cells of either the same type or of different types come together to form a homogeneous kind of building material of the body, like muscle tissue, nervous tissue, connective tissue, etc. That's the tissue level of organization. The organ level. To have an organ, we have two or more tissues that are combined in the right way to produce a discrete structure with a specific function or specific functions. That's the organ level. The organ system level. There we have multiple organs usually coming together to perform some major tasks for the body that usually are related tasks. One example, digestive system. Multiple organs, stomach, small intestine, large intestine. Major functions, taking food in, digesting it, and then absorbing it into the body so you can use the nutrients, and then compacting the waste and defecation or getting rid of that waste. So a few functions, multiple functions, but all rotating around food and nutrition. So again, that's organ systems with one example. Lastly, the organism level. When we take all of these body systems, digestive, reproductive, nervous, skeletal system, muscle system, cardiovascular system, bring all of those body systems together, and you have a fully formed human body. You have an organism. These last ones are down here just for fun, by the way. Usually in anatomy and physiology, we stop there because we're focusing on one species or one organism, human beings, or the human body and how that works. But these are also part of biology's understanding of these levels of organization. Population, community. By the way, population is a group of organisms of the same species. So like a group of squirrels living in a tree maybe, or the group of human beings that live in your town maybe. A community is multiple species within the same geographical area. So if we talk about in your town, maybe we could talk about the humans that live there, but then also the dogs, the cats, the deer, maybe the squirrels, and the microorganisms that live inside you and on everything else, really. So all the organisms that live in that particular area, that's community. Ecosystem brings in other things like the rocks, the dirt, etc., the non-living material that is part of that environment. Biomes, there we're kind of talking about ecosystems that have different characteristics. That's the way I tend to think about it. And I'll give you some examples because the examples make it come clear. Desert biome, deciduous forest biome, ocean biome, and there's actually a few different ocean biomes. But these are specific arrangements. And there's one above biome, by the way, and that is the Earth itself, this life-filled planet of ours. So anyway, those are levels of organization. And again, if you're doing anatomy and phys, you're going to stop at the organism level. All right, more complicated. I'll take it step by step. Chemical level. I said that we're talking about atoms and molecules. At the atomic level, we could actually go deeper in and talk about things like bosons and gluons. These are subatomic particles that make up the larger particles of inside of atoms, like protons, neutrons, and electrons. So we got the subatomic particles like bosons and gluons and such, and then we've got protons, neutrons, and electrons. Those make up atoms. Within atoms, we've got elements like carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, calcium, sodium, etc. For molecules, you've got two or more atoms bound together. The simplest would maybe be an oxygen molecule. That's just two atoms of oxygen bound together. We can get a little more complicated, put some different elements in there, and have a slightly larger molecule of water, which is two different elements, two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom bound together. And then these can get more and more complicated until we get to, again, macromolecules. I'm running out of space. Macromolecules include things like DNA and proteins. They're gigantic molecules when you're thinking about it at the molecular level. They would be huge, huge, huge compared to a water molecule. A molecule of DNA, just one of our larger chromosomes, like the X chromosome, there's millions of atoms making up that molecule of DNA. So it's much larger than a simple water molecule. And that's pretty much it for the chemical level. Let's move to the next one. The cellular level. And again, remember, these build upon each other. So if you've got enough macromolecules and other molecules coming together, we can have a living cell. At the cellular level, we could make a division slightly lower than this and say the organelle level. And again, organelles, I think I mentioned earlier some examples: mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, smooth endoplasmic reticulum and rough endoplasmic reticulum, lysosomes and peroxisomes, all those little organelles that live inside of a cell and carry out specific functions for that cell. That's you could consider that the organelle level, which I put inside of the cellular level. So we've got organelles, and the other critical thing to get at the cellular level is this is where we really have the beginning of life, because cells can perform all of the functions of living things like reproduction, metabolism, excretion of waste, movement, evolution, all of those things that we say life does, cells do that. So it's at that cellular level that we have life. Begins there and continues throughout. The tissue level. Again, to describe a tissue is a homogeneous material that we're made out of, and there's various types of tissues. The four primary tissue types are muscle, nervous tissue, connective tissue, and epithelial tissue. Those are the four primary ones, and there's subcategories of those. Muscle tissue, of course, you see muscle tissue in the muscles in your arms, for example. And again, this is a homogeneous material. If we took a little slice of muscle out of this part of my biceps brachii muscle, and then we took a slice out of my pectoralis muscle, you wouldn't really be able to tell which muscle it came from because they look exactly the same. And again, they would look pretty homogeneous throughout. The same cell types would be present. Another example of a different tissue, let's talk about areolar connective tissue. In areolar connective tissue, you have different types of cells. So sometimes you hear tissues or it's one type of cell and they get all together. That's true sometimes. Epithelial tissues are usually one type of cell, but not always. But in the areolar connective tissue that I was talking about, we have astrocytes that produce the fibers in that areolar connective tissue, and we can have also macrophages inside of that tissue. So there's two different cell types that you would find in that tissue. The macrophages are in there to do cleanup for the tissue. That's why they're there. And the other thing about tissues is, yes, it's made up of cells. The tissue is made up of cells, but also it's made up of the extracellular matrix. So tissues are made up of cells, and I'm just going to put ECM, or extracellular matrix. Extracellular matrix is the stuff between the cells. And usually, but not always, the extracellular matrix is made by the cells that live in the tissue. Example, bone tissue is mostly made up of osteocytes. Those are the cells that live in the bone, separated by an extracellular matrix that is a hard calcium phosphate matrix called hydroxyapatite. So you got cells with some stuff in between, and that stuff in bone is just that hard, bony stuff, the brittle stuff. So cells and extracellular matrix make up a tissue, and again, tissues are homogeneous kind of building materials. The organ level, again, two or more tissues coming together to form usually a discrete structure that performs some function or functions for a larger body system maybe, but of course also for the body as a whole. Examples, I think I gave you an example of the heart before. The heart's a really good example, and it only has one job. It pumps blood. That's all the heart does. And again, it's made up of multiple tissues: epithelial tissue, cardiac muscle, and connective tissue. A couple of different types of connective tissue in the heart. So we've got different tissues coming together to form an organ. I'll bring another organ in just to give you another example, the small intestine. Small intestine is this long, coiled up tube of an organ. It's made up of epithelial tissue, which includes some glands, and it's also got connective tissue, and it's got smooth muscle tissue. Those tissues come together to form the small intestine. And in terms of functions, the small intestine really has one major function, and that is the absorption of nutrients. It also has digestive enzymes. There are digestive enzymes in the wall of the small intestine, and they finish up the chemical digestion of the food that we eat. So another job for the small intestine is breaking down the stuff that we eat on that chemical level, by the way. And by the way, that's not the only thing that does chemical digestion, but the small intestine's wall does like the final steps before absorption. Okay, so that's enough organs, I think, for the organ level. Organ system level. Organ systems are collections of organs that all have the same basic major functions as part of what they do. I mentioned the heart and I mentioned the stomach, or the small intestine the last time around. Let's start with small intestine. It's one of the organs within the organ system called the digestive system. The digestive system is made up of multiple organs. Your teeth are part of it. They're accessory organs of the digestive system, and they are there to break down food. In terms of jobs for the digestive system, because remember, these organ systems perform some jobs or a job. For the digestive system, it's ingestion, bringing food into the body; digestion, breaking food down into smaller and smaller parts, including at the molecular level, breaking apart the molecules of what you ate. And then absorption, once that's done, absorbing nutrients into the body so that you can take advantage of those nutrients. And then compaction of the waste. After you've absorbed as much nutrients as you can out of it, you compact the waste down into formed fecal matter. And then, of course, defecation, or releasing that waste product of fecal matter. That's another job of the digestive system. So in that case, you've got multiple jobs for this multi-organ system. I also mentioned the heart, and again, we could bring in various organs that make up the cardiovascular system. The heart's one. There are also multiple arteries and multiple veins that are considered organs that are part of the cardiovascular system. The blood is also part of the cardiovascular system, but it's not really an organ, it's a tissue. It's one of the connective tissues. So cardiovascular system, another example of a body system with, again, multiple organs. And you could say multiple functions, depending on how you want to put it. The cardiovascular system's job is, of course, to pump blood around the body. And that's important to deliver nutrients to all of the cells that live in the body. But it's also important for taking the waste products away from all of those cells that live in the body. The other thing the cardiovascular system does is it's kind of a delivery system for everything else, like hormones, water and electrolytes, etc. All of those nutrients that we talked about, and also for the waste. So if you were to think of just one function for the cardiovascular system, it would be transport, basically. It's a transport network. So that's enough about organ systems, and I think we covered organism level well enough. In order to have a full human organism, you need to have all 11. A full, complete, healthy human being would need to have all of what we consider the 11 body systems, and let's see if I can go through all of them. Integumentary system, muscular system, skeletal system, nervous system, endocrine system, lymphatic system, immune system, reproductive system, cardiovascular system. I'm shy one, and I'm not sure what it is. See if you can come up with it. So anyway, that is, again, a more complicated version of these levels of organization. And what I recommend to students is that, again, you be able to put them in order, and then in essay form, in writing, be able to describe each one of those levels of organization. So your instructor on the essay portion of your exam should be able to just put, for example, what is the tissue level of organization? And you write a paragraph or so about what the tissue level of organization is, and maybe give examples and that sort of thing. So let's do a quiz. Just a quick quiz. Actually, it might take you some time, so be ready to pause if you want to partake in this quiz. Here's the first thing to be able to do. List the levels of organization in order, starting from the least complex level of organization. And again, if you did that right, you'd have chemical level, cellular level, tissue level, organ level, organ system level, and then organism level. How about give me a one paragraph description of the cellular level of organization? And again, for the cellular level of organization, I'll just take a little bit of time and do it again. The cellular level of organization includes cells. Inside the cells, we have organelles like Golgi apparatus and mitochondria, and rough and smooth endoplasmic reticulum. And for your essay question, you might even go into slight detail about those. Golgi apparatus is there for processing and packaging of proteins for delivery either to parts inside of the cell or to be exported out of the cell. Mitochondria, its job is the recycling of ATP or generation of ATP. It's energy. It has an energy function. What the mitochondria does is it breaks down food molecules like sugars and lipids and sometimes proteins, and in breaking them down, it gets energy from them, and it uses that energy to regenerate ATP, to make ATP molecules. The rough endoplasmic reticulum, its job is protein synthesis and protein processing. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum is mostly about lipid metabolism. But all of those organelles are inside of cells. Cells themselves are the building blocks of living things. They are what life is made out of. If you're a multicellular organism like us, you are made out of either cells, you are made out of cells and the products of the cells, the things that the cells make. And lastly, for cells, that's the level of organization where we say life begins. It's this level of complexity is required in order for something to display all of the properties of life, like reproduction, metabolism, excretion, etc. Those functions that life does, or the properties of life. Cells display those. That's just a few questions. Come up with your own. Highly recommend that you take each one of those levels of organization and be able to write a paragraph about it. And of course, real simple, but be able to put those levels of organization in order. So let's do that one more time. I had you put the levels of organization in order starting from the least complex. Now do it from the other direction. Start over and start from the most complex level of organization for the human body, and take that down to the least complex level of organization. And I'll just tell you what it is real quick. You'd start with the organism level, so a full body of a human being, then go to the organ system level, digestive system, respiratory system, etc. Oh, respiratory system, that was on the list of 11 that I forgot. Okay, so sorry. Organism level, organ system level, organ level, tissue level, cellular level, and then chemical level. So those are those levels. Okay, I've taken enough of your time. Study, study, study. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And thank you once again for watching.